I'm here. We're here. I had a little stream for it felt like a few minutes, probably was like a half hour, and then I had something come up that I had to take care of. But I'm back now for a longer period of time, and we're gonna keep working on this lovely RSVP button. So yeah, we have this refactored. Let's actually, while we're at it, move it to its own file. So we're gonna go into the features, the event feature inside presentation widgets. We will make a what was this thing called? Event RSVP button widget dot dart. And we will import all the things we need, of course. You know, lovely app button. Okay, cool. Then I'm actually going to, well, let's actually import it over here. And okay, so that's imported. I'm actually going to refactor this because I'm trying to be very verbose with my different class names, you know, a widget versus a provider versus whatever. So we're going to call it that. And that also now matches the file name. Okay, so this actually needs to be a base component because we want to have access to our state management. So we'll change this to body. And here we actually can get access to widget ref, which of course we need to import. Um, let's just see. I'm just going to kind of figure out how this works again. We have is it a use? What's our provider called for? Um, we have auth provider and auth state. Auth provider. Right. I think this is what we want to watch. Watch the auth provider. Um, let's see what this is. This is auth state. Yeah, so let's call it auth state. And then we can make a variable called like final is RSVP'd equals. We need to basically do a check here to make sure auth state is success. Auth state is auth state success, and auth state dot user dot event RSVP IDs dot contains, and then we pass in the event dot ID. So this should be a Boolean. Yep. So here we would do, if they're RSVP'd, we would use icons.bookmark. Otherwise, we use outline. So let's test out. Because here we just need a full reload because our data structure has changed. So if I go now to that event, see more. Oh, right. We want to. So that is. Yeah, I think we want to do a couple things here. We want to make the label different. Is RSVP'd. I don't know, like, oops. I think instead of the bookmark icon here, we can actually have a check or something. Maybe even just says like attending. Yeah, that works well. And then RSVP, maybe it's not a bookmark. It's a, what's a good icon for that? We could do checkbox outline blank. So let's just to test this out, we'll invert this. So it'd say like, or actually, we'll just change both, whatever. So it would look kind of like this. I mean, the box kind of looks lame, to be honest. Um, oh, the circle could be cool. RSVP. Could have something to do with a calendar. We could also just use the star. Star. I changed the wrong one, didn't I? Yep. This was going to be checkbox. Kind of like the circular checkbox. So RSVP, yeah, the star works for now, whatever. So it would look like this: attending, circle. That looks all right. Um, all right. Okay. So this doesn't do anything yet, but let's just make sure that if it was to change, um, meaning we deleted this RSVP as an example from our backend, and we won't do a refresh because we have no way for the app to um, automatically do that without interacting ourselves. We should see RSVP. Yeah, there we go. Maybe we'll use star outline to make it like boom. That works enough for me. Now we need to actually make it work. I have a question in the chat. How you got the boilerplate when creating a new file? Oh, sure. I think what you mean is this. Let me just make a test.dart file. If you have the VS Code extension for Flutter, you can type STL. You can just go to Flutter stateless widget. You'll see stateless widget, you'll see stateful widget, depending on what you want to do. And that just gives you this, and it already has this highlighted. So if I start typing, it's going to change both instances of that. Similar for stateful, that. Now I have a few more because I have the RiverPod. I have the RiverPod extension too, so I can get like a stateless consumer, which is kind of similar to a stateless widget, same idea. So yeah, that's how I do that. That's just built into at least VS Code if you have the extension. Like as in you don't have to do anything else. I'm sure there's a way to turn it off, but you shouldn't have to turn it on. Okay. So now what we need is a way to actually RSVP. Um, Easier said than done. We're gonna go back to the Django side. It's the most fun thing about full stack solo development. You get to flip back and forth. And in here, let's think for a second. It's gonna be part of our API. It's gonna be part of event URLs. So we're gonna have something called RSVP. And we could have like an RSVP, I guess. And let's just go here and we're going to make a new thing called class event RSVP view. And it doesn't need to use any of our special mixins and doesn't even have to use event API view because it's just kind of like a utility one. We're just using a generic view. And it is going to be a post. So it'd be self request args quargs. And even though you can call that whatever you want, you might as well spell it correctly. And yeah, we're going to have the ID. Yeah, okay. So it's just going to be a post. And we're going to use, of course, before we forget, update the URL to use this one. And we want to use that here too. And we can actually, so that we can use the same view for both of these, we can actually pass in some quarks here. And I have to remember how to do this. I'm just going to pull open really any other project do I have? No, I don't have that project here on this computer. Let's just, sure. I just want to remember the way to do this. URLs. Yeah, so it's something like this. Right after as view, we can pass in. Okay, so it's part of the path. Is that right? Yep. So we'll just do RSVP, un-RSVP, and we'll have these things add and remove. Or we can say, yeah, that works. Then I believe we can just get access to that. Let's just see track share view, this example. What was the thing? Will share. Yeah, so it's just something like that. So basically we can get access to this. So we can just say like if bool quargs add. I don't think we even have to boolean that. If quargs add, elif Quargs remove, and then we can also just kind of throw some kind of error. Um, where's am I not, no? All right. Where's response come from again? Because we're just going to be creating a custom response here. Um, Otherwise, things will complain. So for here, we're not going to have any data, but we can have a status code of, um, like this one will never be called because we control this right here. But it's just nice to have in case we add something in the future. So status, we can just go 201 or something. Okay, so if someone is adding it, well, we have to get access to the event. Oh, actually, we do need the retrieve model mix in here because we want to get it from that PK, which it will do by default. So what we can basically now do is event RSVP equals event RSVP, the actual model. What is it? From content dot models import event. Oh, I think the reason I'm getting some weird IntelliSense is because I have the Django app VS Code open one step higher than I normally would, so it's not necessarily understanding my project super well. So we want to do this .objects .get or create because we don't want to create a new one. Speaking of, while I'm thinking about that, event RSVP model. Let's have a unique together on this. Basically, the event and the owner. We should only ever have one. Is that the right way to do this? It seems like my only thing, so we'll find out. So we want to basically get or create using the owner equaling request.user and the event itself equaling self dot, I guess we can get the event here, self dot get object. So get object will actually just get us the event. So we create it, and then yeah, we just basically, in fact, we're just going to just put a dot 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 here so we don't get that thing. Yeah, we're just going to return like an empty thing. Okay, then if it's removing, we want to say then RSVP equals, or we could even just do it this way. Event RSVP dot objects dot filter where the PK, or sorry, where the basically these two things here dot delete, and then we do the same thing. So if we're adding, we're creating it. Otherwise, we're deleting it. And oops, that should just be called event, and that should be called event, not self.event. I don't know why I did that. All right, so there's our event RSVP view and the unRSVP. Cool. Let's see if we have any errors in our thing. It looks like we're good, at least until we test it. Hey, Flutter Guides. Welcome to the channel. We're making a Flutter app. You probably would be interested based on your username. Okay. So now we actually have to work with this in our front end. So this also falls to me within the event namespace. Let's start with the domain side on creating our event data source. So we're going to have a future. Let's just return void. And this will be called RSVP. And for this, we need an int of the ID. Yeah, just an int of the ID. So this is just like our interface. So we're not actually writing code here. We're just saying like, hey, this is what the event data source, expects. And we're going to want something kind of similar for our repository, event repository. The only difference here is we are going to return an either failure or void. Okay, and the cool thing about doing that is now we're going to have errors because we're not actually doing this. So we can just simply go command dot and create the one missing override for that. And we are going to make this async. And what we want to do is essentially have a try. We're going to go await client dot post. And we want to post to /event /ID /RSVP. And then we might have an error. In that case, we're going to throw the error. Okay, and then similarly here, we do the same thing. And I'm just going to basically copy this. It's going to be very similar, where we're going to use our data source.rsvp and pass it in. All right, cool. So that should get us RSVPing. Now, I should have just done this first, but we should also have a un-RSVP. And same with our repository. And now we'll go and see these two errors again and basically make it. However, it'd be even faster if I just really copy this, change this to un-RSVP, and change this to un-RSVP because that's what our URL is expecting. Similarly here, copy this, un-RSVP, and we forgot the capital. Okay, so now we have our things to do that. So let's go back to our button now. Is that all we need? I think so. Event RSVP button widget. So here we can probably just go ref.read. It would be our event repository provider dot RSVP. And we pass in event.id. Oh, because ID could be null. So probably if the ID is not null, we're going to have a major problem here. This should never be the case. The reason it could be null is if just in the system that I made, like a new event that a user would be creating, might have a null ID before it's saved. But in this case, we're not even building, you can't make an event through the app. It's just done through the backend. So if event.id equals null, let's just return out of this. Because I am confident that will never be the case. And I mean, if it is, this is what we should do anyways, because how can you RSVP to something that doesn't exist? And yeah, we should just basically check. We can do it this way, is RSVP'd. I want to actually await. Can I await like this? I think so. No, you can't. So I'd have to have this both times. So basically, if we're RSVP'd, we want to un-RSVP. Otherwise, we RSVP. And that will, in theory, make this work. Let's just test that. This will not update the UI properly, but let's see if it is, in fact, creating the RSVP. So right now, there's no RSVPs. If I RSVP now, still not working. Okay, wonder why. We have oh, look at this. We have a major server error. Did I URLs for event? So it's /event /CID /RSVP. Whoa, okay, here we go. Oh, it's an issue with my actual Python code. Um, what is it saying here? I usually like to test these things through like Postman first, but I'm getting excited. Um, oh, because we don't have a query set. Because we still, you know what, we still need to actually use the event. Right. Because originally I was thinking we wouldn't be using the get object, but it makes sense to use the get object, just makes it easier to get it. Okay, so now let's try clicking it again. I clicked it, I think. There it is. Look, we have that. Now, in order to test undoing it, I actually am going to refresh the app so that we get the updated state from the server. And, oh, interesting. So something is not working here, but that's okay. How can we test this? Um, is it, you know what, it might be because I think we're just going to have to print out some data here, or just double check some stuff. But at least that's working. So it'd be the auth state. Oh, let's just do auth provider. Just need a place to basically print out the current user. We need to do it when we know we have the user. So let's just do print user dot. So we should have the event RSVP IDs right here. And I'm just gonna also go okay, so let's save that. Green arrow so that this gets called. So we are okay, we are getting the ID back. So let's now go to our event button. Okay, so RSVP. If the auth state is success and auth user dot contains event dot ID. Okay, let's just print out some stuff here. Event ID. And we want to print out, and maybe, yeah, actually, yeah, this will be, we can still do this. Let's print out this too. Now this will throw an error. Yeah, isn't, so I guess we just have to wrap this in if auth state is auth state success. Then we can print that. And let's just copy this. Okay, we're ready to debug this now. Yes, using a debugger would have been easier. Okay, so we got that. And then if I need to look at one of these things, oh, this event, oh, wait, what? Okay, so the idea of this is, the idea of this one is 2, but this event is 1? Hang on. This is number 2, and 2 is correct coming with the server, but for some reason it thinks this is 1. What? I have a possible ID. Okay, so wait, where's my title? Yeah, okay, so this is the correct one, but it says the ID is 1. All right. How's that possible? Int ID. Does the ID not come back from the friggin' API? Do I have docs? Do I have Swagger on this project? No, I should probably add Swagger. Okay, let's look at the event serializer. Yeah, we're setting the ID back. But for some reason, it thinks the ID is 1, not 2. How? What? Event detail widget. Okay, so we have our title. Why not passing in the right event. There's our button. Where do we put the title here? There's the image network. Then we have the event.title. So I'm going to make this, instead of saying event.title, this is going to say event.id.toString. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. It thinks this is 1. Is this really 1? Doesn't make any sense to me. Event.title. We'll put that back. Oops. Where's my... Oh, there we go. Okay, what is going on? Oh, I know exactly what's going on. I'm so dumb. So the ID coming back is the ID of this relationship, the event RSVP. Doik. So we want to go back to our user model. Sorry, our user model.py. I'm pretty sure this is what's happening. So yeah, we're getting the PK of the RSVPs themselves and not the event. So we actually want to use event.pk. Jesus. Okay, let's make sure that Docker liked that change. So far, so good. Let's refresh. And if everything went well, we should see that we are attending. Look at that. Silly me. Silly me. Okay, so let's go back to our thing. Let's get rid of all this debugging stuff because now it's working. And then in theory, if I click this again, we have a similar error to before. This should be a different error. Wow. Here we go. If quarks add, so what is the actual error message? Response, oh yeah, okay. Okay. Event URLs. So what we have to check is basically if add in, or we can do it this way. This is the safe way to do it. If quarks.get add false by default, and we do the same here. This is a safer way to work with dictionaries in Python because you basically try and get it, and you can set a default. And that's probably our problem. All right, let's just refresh. We'll go back to our lovely event here. Attending, so I should be able to click this. We don't get an error. Let's get rid of, apparently I have some other, yeah, let's get rid of these debug things too for later. I save now. And if we go back to here now to our event RSVPs, there should be none because we just undid it. Now it's about getting the state of the button to update. So after this all runs, we could probably simply just go, remember how we do this. Date user. I think I have some helper for this. Init, login, register, log out, request password reset. Let me just see where I'm calling this from. REST session provider, yeah. I think I would do it. I think I would do it in here. We have initialize. Maybe not. Okay, auth provider. I feel like I could probably just make something for this, which to me should be probably right after the init. Future void refresh user. We'll call it refresh remote user. And it'll work a lot like So this will be this. So then we would do result.fold. We could have an error there. And for now, I'm just going to print the error. And on write, we would have the user. Let's make sure this is a user. Cool. Then we basically do basically the same code as the init without the initialization. But this is something we'll probably use a lot. So I should now be able to go here and do ref.read auth provider .notifier .refresh remote user. So this will call this, which will go and actually update the state to have the new version of the user in it, which will have, in theory, that updated ID. We could, of course, also just kind of modified that through here, but this is just a safe way to always make sure it's synced with the server. Maybe there's two people like using the same user account, who knows? Okay, so in theory, if I RSVP now, look at it. D, and an RSVP. Oh, no. Now I'm thinking for if we are RSVP, we should probably have some kind of confirm thing so you don't accidentally tap it for like unsubscribing basically. So do I have a yeah, confirm dialog dot show because someone might just click it not knowing what it does because it's kind of just saying body should be something like you want to remove just do that for now. I'm sure there's better language, but we're going to make it destructive. Confirm text, remove, cancel text, cancel, which I'm pretty sure cancel text default is cancel anyways, so we don't have to put that in. So what we want to do here is await this. We're going to have something called final confirmed equals this. This should be of type Boolean, but it could be null because they could have just clicked cancel or clicked dismissed it. So we want to say if confirmed does not equal true, we want to basically return out. We don't want to continue with this code path. All right, that should do that. So now I can RSVP. Yay, I'm RSVPing. I can go like this and I'll see, are you sure you want to remove this RSVP? Yep, so it's not doing anything, but if I click remove, it's done. Beautiful. All right, I see some questions and stuff in the chat. Give me 1 minute. I just have to look at a couple things on my phone from some notifications that are possibly important. And I will then come back probably in 2 minutes with answers to your questions and more. What up? Okay. Um, okay, so yeah, I said I would answer some questions in the chat, or I don't know if there's any questions. I see some chatter, which is always fun. Okay. Sir, how are you going to catch exceptions if repository throws an error? Like sending exceptions to the sentry or even crash licks? Yeah, that's definitely one option. Sentry is a good spot. That's a possibility. Um, Ultimately, I think the main reason, I mean, one of the main, that's a good thing. Yes, you want to be able to remote log that stuff, and we'll probably do that at some point. But secondly, it's also just good for showing like user, responses to a user, things like that your password is incorrect or, whatever kind of stuff. So it's kind of used for any of that stuff. There's certain cases you don't necessarily want to throw sentry up because it could just be like, you're trying to do something that her permissions denied or something like that, or like, hey, you've already used all your credits this month. Like that's not something you want to just globally set up to Sentry. Um, that's something that you want to respond to with your user. So that's really how it is. And if you're really interested, I'd be happy to walk you through really like the whole flow of this clean architecture at some point on this stream or otherwise. But that's what I can answer that for now. Yeah, is it possible with either? I guess follow up to that. Yeah, kind of. I mean, basically, I guess the way I would do it, if there was particular ones I wanted to, like for instance, where we're doing this print right here, fetching the remote user, something goes wrong, maybe that's a good place to do Sentry, and I'd probably have like a singleton for my Sentry thing and do a ref.read. Throw this error, and I could even, send the stack trace up or whatever, because what error has a message. It doesn't have a stack trace, but it could, like we could add, other things to it to get, put in. But also with Sentry, like you can just wrap your whole app in Sentry and basically any like, or have a DO interceptor or whatever for any network request errors and have those automatically go up. You don't necessarily have to handle them as like one-off sorts of things. Have you ever heard about zones? You know what? Like, yes. Do I know what they are? I'm not exactly, I couldn't explain it. And that's something actually when you're adding Sentry, you wrap your whole app in a zone. Look it up. I could try and answer it, but it would just be me either Googling it, or bullshitting something. So I'm not going to try and answer it. I remember also using zones back in like the Angular day too. Angular days. Um, Hi, hello. Hey, new sub, just sub now. Yeah, welcome. I got lots of cool content on here. I mean, I think it's cool. Some people think it's cool. We're growing. We're trying to grow, and we're trying to make apps, and we're trying to learn. Okay, so there we go. So yeah, we got one thing off the list, RSVPing. That's cool. Now I think it might make sense to have the button also here, maybe on the card, although. Maybe it's more just an indicator of whether they are going or not. Let's play with something like that. So that would be like the event card, I guess. So we have where do we have the title? So there's our title. This is in a column. So what I'm going to do is actually wrap this in a row. And we're going to wrap this in an expanded so it just takes up as much room as it can. And then after that, we're going to essentially, I could make a widget for this, but we could probably just sort of do what we do in the event RSVP button widget. How do we do this? So we could, yeah, just have basically this right here. Oh, we gotta convert this to a base component so we can get ref. Actually, no, the better way to do this is that would have been silly. So I'm just gonna make a container here, just temporarily. We're gonna wrap this in a builder, but instead of just it being a builder, it's going to be a consumer. Which means we now have access to ref here. That way, we can have the logic for this here, and if something in auth state changes, it doesn't have to rebuild the whole thing. It's just going to rebuild this. We also need a third argument called child, which we're not going to make use of, so we'll use an underscore, and I will remove the breakpoint I accidentally just added. Oh, it's gone. We do need to import in these things. And basically, we want to, if is RSVP'd, here we would return, an icon with like that check mark or something, icons.check checkbox. Do we use the circle one? What do we actually use here? Might as well use the same iconography. Yeah, it's the circle one. So check checkbox, circle. It's probably that. Okay. Otherwise, we're just going to return a size box. So we have to return something. And we can specifically use sizebox.shrink. This can also be a const. This can also be a const. I guess I have the const error thing turned off. Oh. Okay, so now we should see on this screen a little checkbox there. And in fact, we could probably wrap this in another row with a, or maybe we want, let me see my badge. Badge app. Do I have a app? App badge. Oh, I don't have a badge thing. Okay, whatever. Okay, so we have our row, and then we're going to wrap this in a, or sorry, not wrap it, but we're going to have some text that says attending. Let's do that. So now we should see that there. We want a little bit of spacing. Yay! I'm on a I'm on a new enough version of Flutter to have spacing. I love this is like my new favorite thing. It's so stupid, but the spacing option in columns and widgets is just like or columns and rows is awesome. Instead of having to add size boxes or padding or whatever between things, you can just do it here. So there we go. Attending. Cool. Now, does it look better with the icon to the left or right? I think to the left. So this isn't going to be interactive because I think it's like if you really want to on RSVP, like let's make them come to this page and let's just make sure that everything updates. And look, it's gone now. That's how you do it. Question in the chat, Bill with UG. What am I making? I'm making an app for a client. It's basically, I don't really need to go into the details about who the client is or whatever. But essentially it's a event space kind of thing. So there's events, there's things you can book, there's streams of the place, there's whatever. We have a profile, yay. But it's a Flutter app. So Flutter on the front end for iOS and Android. And then the back end is in Django. And this is all built within my own meta framework called Houston, which is really cool. And I have plenty of videos and content on it, so I'm not going to necessarily dig into that now. But that's what we're doing. I couldn't use stack trace with either. That was a big problem. Why wouldn't you be able to use a stack trace with the either? Like the way I would do it. So, I mean, let's just add this for your for my. I mean, this is just me kind of thinking out loud, but I'm gonna try and do what you're thinking here. So let's go to for instance the auth data source because this would need to be in yeah. So auth data source. Let's actually find an implementation of this. Auth data source Django implementation. Oh, that's not the right thing. I need to remember how to get to this. Auth data source implementation. There it is. Auth data source Django. So like, at a basic level, you could, in the actual data source itself, right? You get the stack trace here, right? And a try catch, the second parameter is called whatever you want to call it, but it's a stack trace. You'll see it's, if I hover over it, somewhere you get this. However, if you didn't want to be calling them directly in the data source, what I would do is we have this thing called a server exception, and I would actually have another thing called a stack. Is it a stack overflow error or a stack trace? Let's see what this parameter actually is. I don't know why I'm not getting the. Does this tell you? Okay, there it is. Yeah, so it is a type stack trace. We'll make it, nullable. This dot message a problem occurred. And then can I think I can do this. This dot stack trace. Wait. I don't think you can do it this way. So let's just make it the second parameter as it is. So now our server exception which extends exception, potentially can have a stack trace pulled in. So what I could do here is then for the second parameter, actually, pass in stack trace as like a pattern. Meaning when we get this in the repository side, because this is the data source. So let's go to our auth repository. I assume it's something similar. Django. No. Auth repository. This is the thing. Let me just search for where this gets extends. Abstract interface. Here it is. Auth repository implementation, which is where instead of doing a try catch, we are essentially using the ethers and stuff, folding on it. So in this case, where we're doing current user, so wait, this, yeah, okay, so we have our user. Because what was failure again? Failure is more for like the UI, which is, this is where I actually wanted to have, I think. Yeah, I think, sorry to, I'm going to get rid of, I mean, we can still keep that, it's fine. But I guess what I really meant to do was so we have a try, we have this, yeah, so, okay, yeah, this will still work. So failure, we basically want to have the same thing. And this is just the way I've set this up, like yours might be different. So we would just have a stack trace again. And maybe it should be like that, whatever. And this should be nullable. So basically then when we would pass this thing through, when we're creating like the actual failure, right, we would use e.stackTrace as the second parameter because we have that from the actual server exception, right? So the server exception holds the stack trace and then we basically pass it through to our failure. And then, yeah, we could react to it in wherever our code was, right? Like, on it, I mean, there's multiple, like you could do it right here, right? You could actually, from this point, just be like, century.log and then pass in the stack trace, right? Or if we're passing it through this way too, in your UI, when you do the fold, you could, in theory, do it there. So that's how I would more or less do it. If that is helpful, hopefully. Okay, more stuff in the chat. Yeah, it's interesting to see an app made with Riverpod. I've been using Block for the last year. Yeah, Block's pretty good. I love Riverpod. It just like works with my style really well. And actually, Riverpod 3 is out. This is still using Riverpod 2. I'm going to be experimenting with that soon and see. I've been following it, and it's done some things that I think simplify stuff. So I think it's going to be pretty good. Yeah, don't worry, no mistakes. Flutter guides. I'll send me a link to your article about that. I feel like Flutter guides. That sounds familiar. I've probably been on your website or newsletter before. Okay, back to the work at hand. Okay, so we have RSVP stuff working, which is great. What did I want to do next? RSVPing to events. Okay. Yeah, the next thing I want to do is we have this idea of announcements. So I can read an announcement. Maybe there's more details about it that just loads somewhat of our website. But I can dismiss these too, which is cool. And even when I rebuild the app, it's gone because it's actually storing that in persistent memory. However, it will still show up in, the all announcements, and you can restore the dismissed ones, just by doing that. And now look, they're all back, which is cool. What we want to have is also a ability to sort of have like a persistent, like sticky one that's at the top that's a little like more calling out, like maybe something like, hey, it's time to update the app, or I don't know, like something that can be set in the back end to, just really call it out. It'll be brighter, that kind of thing. Now, I don't want to make a whole new model for this. I think we would use the announcement model and just kind of have like a parameter of it being sticky or whatever. So let's just look at our announcement model. Title, body, CTA. Oh, is pinned. Are we making use of that anywhere? We do have the is pinned. Oh, that's in the freezed. So we have that. Let's just look for this now. Boop-a-doop-a-doo. That's just the form provider. Yeah, I don't think we're actually making use of it. So let's just well, let's make sure. Maybe because it's funny, I could have already done this and not even known. It's been a while since I've dug into this part of it. So let's do okay. Big announcement is supposed to be pinned. So yeah, we're not making use on the front end, but we do sort of have a way to get this. Now, let me just review. We have an announcement list. Sure, announcement list screen. There's our like infinite list of announcements. But I think what I want to do is actually make it so that in our announcement URLs, so this is the list view. It's actually technically a list create view, but whatever. I'm eventually going to just get rid of some of the stuff here or make, the permissions like admin only, but it's all good for development. So let's actually have one that just calls like pinned here. And essentially with this, we have like a query set. I'm going to do all announcements query set. Yeah, there's a bunch of ways we can do this. I'm going to make a new one called class announce, or let's call it like pinned announcement list view. So this will still use our list model mixin, and it will use our announcement API view to get all that lovely stuff. And we just need to copy this get. So we want to just get the list back, but what we want to override is the get query set. Get query set. So here we can just do our super.get query set, but we actually filter it by is pinned equals true. And then what I'm kind of thinking is the normal list view. We essentially what happened here? Oh, we lost the space. Oh, I see the problem. Wait, what's going on? How did I do that? So what I want to do is in the normal list view, we just get rid of, we basically are like, hey, we're not going to show the pinned ones in that. And we're going to have a separate endpoint for getting the pinned ones. I think this just works cleaner for me. Sure, is it the most optimized way? Maybe. But this should work. So I'm also going to get rid of this stuff too, because we actually don't need it. And we don't even need, we need this. Sorry, hang on. Okay, so this will just use the list model mixin. This one's also just a list model mixin. And I guess we want, oh yeah, this will actually work just fine. So basically we're gonna have a list for just our normal announcements, and we're just gonna call this actually list view, not list create. Let's make that change now. List view, list view, list view. Although, sorry, this one's going to use the pinned announcement list view. But we can still use this one exactly the same, because whether you're getting an ID of a pinned one for, getting the detail view of it, it doesn't matter whether it's pinned or not. However, we don't even need any of this stuff. So we can get rid of that, and we can get rid of these two mixins as well. Okay, so we'll save that. And I'm seeing that we got a lot in the chat. So before I go into the next thing, Are you adding a data cache system? So yes, cache is a big word. There's a lot of caching that happens in this. So on the front end, we're using like river providers and stuff to essentially cache things until we tell them to invalidate. So once it's loaded, it's not going to load again, but we can invalidate it when we know a change is coming, or if the user like pulls down to refresh or whatever. Um, that's all cached in memory. It's not like when I come to this screen, it's not reloading any of this stuff if it already has it. I have to do this to reload, or the user's done something that I want to be like, hey, invalidate this so the next time it doesn't go. So yes, using caching, that's something that Riverpod is pretty great at. Most state management stuff is good at. And then on the back end, like caching is a big thing too. Like for instance, not that I have it implemented now, but it's pretty trivial to do with Django. We could have our list of events be like cached for a minute or 10 minutes or an hour or however long we think is good, so that it's not calculating this stuff. Now our server is going to be fast enough, especially to support the amount of users that will be using this. But like that's something that easily could be added, and that's one of the reasons actually, if you were here earlier when I added the ability to RSVP, the logic of whether you're RSVP'd or not does not even come from the list views API. It is something that's stored on the user itself, just like a string of all the IDs, a list of all the IDs. That way, this data can come back more restfully, like more, something that you can cache, right? Because you can't really like cache data when it's needs to be like customized for the specific request, because then you're going to be getting data that's not actually for you. So I always try and do that with like list views and stuff, is when it makes sense, to for like shared data so that you can cache it easily. That's my answer on cache. Um, do, 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 do. So yeah, Flutter Flow. I mean, make Flutter Flow is fine. I'm happy that it exists. I think it's helping a lot of people that that want to be able to do no code. Like, would I use it? No. But that's because I'm an experienced developer. Would I use it to prototype something and then like mess with the code? Definitely not. The code it spits out, from what I've heard and understood, is it's pretty spaghetti-ish. It's also like has a lot of vendor lock, right? Like you need to use Google Firebase for it. Various other things, I'm sure. Um, but I think for the right purpose, it's good. I try not to trash talk it. Although like I could do a better version. No, I'm just kidding. Um, Flutter Flow, do. I like Django, but the inheritance can get so confusing. It can. It takes practice. It's all the stuff with like mixins or whatever, are kind of confusing. They can be confusing, but once you get like used to it, it's super handy. Because like, to just basically be like, hey, I want a list of my stuff. All I'm really doing is saying like, okay, here's the query set, like the maximum amount of things that it has access to, which is really just like and this is on the Django REST framework side. It's like any announcement is fine. We give it a serializer, right? So this is how we want the data to be sent back to the client. These are the fields, and these are the fields that can never be changed by the client. Permission classes, they have to be is authenticated, whatever. We can have filters. This one doesn't have any, but I have the boilerplate there, so I can do it. And then like, if I use the list model mixin, I get this thing called self.list, which is built into Django REST framework and does all this like complicated stuff that we never have to worry about, but super like better than having to write out like something that would be like, okay, now I have to get all the things, and then I have to paginate it, and then I have to, map it to a serializer. Like this is just like clean and easy. And I have used Django Ninja and something like that, and I've used like Flask and stuff, or sorry, Fast API and stuff, but I still come back to Django REST framework. I think it's like the most solid thing, but it's like I can see why people complain about it, because it can be confusing at times, and I still get confused. But luckily, I have tons of Django projects that I can use for reference to be like, oh yeah, how did I do that over there? And now that there's like Claude and all that shit, like it's an even better world. But I'm trying not to use Claude on my streams. Um, Although we sometimes will still use it. What am I building? Yeah, again, just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's an app that has content, and users and authentication, and I even have biometrics. Although I can't show that because it requires a real device to really test it out. But this allows you to actually log in um, with a biometrics thing. Which wait, can I? kind of show it. I can enable it. No, it just doesn't work at all in the simulator. That's okay. Um, Okay, I'm a web dev. I always wanted to learn mobile. I don't know if I should learn React Native or Flutter. I definitely recommend checking out Flutter. Although you might be more familiar with React Native because I imagine by being a web dev, you probably have experience with React. React is good. Like React Native is like it's on the way out. It's still if you're trying to get like an enterprise job, sure, it's still useful. It'll probably be around for a long time because big companies aren't gonna like switch, to something new. They have their engineers, they have their stack. But Flutter is just it's just better in every way than React Native, and that's if you want to know all my thoughts, let me know. Cool. Um, if you have 5,000 daily active users, do I need server caching? Um, Not necessarily. It really depends on how complicated your data is. Like um, just think of server caching as like how much work does my server basically have to do when a particular request comes in? Because if it's just sending back, data that's kind of like, simple, like it's one database query and it's your database is like, organized properly. It's like a simple, select all from here and do this and whatever. Like you probably don't even need cache with 5,000 daily active. Again, it depends. Is that getting called by a user every 5 seconds or once a day? Um, However, if it's something where it's like, okay, this has to, make a relation, do a bunch of joins in your database query and process something and run it through some weird thing, and it like that takes time, then like caching is probably for you. It's definitely something you can test. Structure of the folders. Sure, this is clean architecture. If you are very interested in really knowing how this is set up, I have a video on my channel called it's like pretty recent, one of my more recent ones. It's called like introducing Houston or something. Houston, I have a problem, something like that, and it'll explain everything. It's a walkthrough of basically more or less my app, my framework called Houston. So Houston itself is not just Flutter. Flutter is one of the pieces, but there's also tied with a backend, and there's a CLI for it too for doing code scaffolding and a whole bunch of like great stuff. Um, my backend of choice is Django, but Houston actually supports Supabase as well as a backend, and it supports ServerPod, if you're familiar, with potential plans to support like Firebase and a few other things. Ultimately, it's not just Django. The backend, Houston itself could the Flutter app built in Houston could support any RESTful API, but it won't generate you the code for anything other than Django right now. In terms of REST. Yeah, check out that video. But yeah, basically on the Flutter side, it is clean architecture. So there's a feature for every, core feature, which generally aligns with like a data model or like a database table, if you want to think of it that way. So for instance, inside like event, we have data, domain, and presentation. Presentation is mostly UI stuff. But it does include providers because there's certain providers that to me are presentation related, which are things to deal with, like for instance, a detail provider that is keeping, and caching the state of a particular event in this case. That is presentation side. There's stuff for dealing with forms or like lists, like that's all that. But mostly it's like, it's screens, it's widgets, it's that kind of stuff. It's the state that, might go to those providers. We have the data layer, which is actually, how we talk data sources is like the closest thing to our API or whatever the external source or thing is. So this is the thing that actually is the closest and goes and talks to the RESTful API by making an API call to it. Then you have the repository itself, which is talks to like basically communicates to the data source. The idea with clean architecture and actually why I'm using it for Houston is because in a real Houston project, I've stripped some stuff out, but there'll be a data source for Django. There'll be a data source um, for like ServerPod for whatever. And the idea is for everything data related, this is the only code that would ever like change. And I can swap to go to another thing because the event repository implementation doesn't actually talk to the data source Django. It's talking to it's ultimately all it knows is it's talking to something called event data source, which is an abstract class that basically defines the shape of everything. So it's super sweet in that way. Like if I wanted to move this to serverpod, I wouldn't have to rewrite any of my app. I would just have to make, a new data source for each of those things and basically like tell it to use that one instead. Domain is kind of like um, yeah, the stuff that is not specific, it's specific to the app's architecture and doesn't change what, no matter what your backend is. And this is where our abstract classes are too. So the event data source that I showed you, or the, event repository abstract class. Um, so yeah, the idea is nothing, you can basically like completely change your backend by just changing the implementation of this file, and everything else will just, continue to work, assuming you do it properly. What else in domain? Models are in domain. So for instance, event model, this is what an event is. It has an ID, a UID, it has a title, all that kind of stuff. And this is using freezed. There's my quick super walkthrough. Now there are, aside from like the different features, there are some core stuff. Like there's stuff for like models that are not feature specific, or providers like that aren't really like tied to a feature. I mean, the biometric provider, I probably could move that into auth, and it would feel right, but it's fine here. Like, our REST client provider, it doesn't, matter. It's going to be used by all of these things basically. Like theme stuff. I have a lot of widgets that I reuse, that are used, so on and so forth. Um, check out that Houston video. You can, see more for sure. Cool, cool, cool. And then yeah, one more question I'll answer right now, but keep throwing them in the chat if you want. And but we have, I am creating wallpaper app like Pinterest to Flutter Web. Um, it could. I would have to know more about what you're trying to do. Um, if I'm understanding you as if like you're kind of just making like a Pinterest clone, I probably wouldn't say Flutter Web is the best thing for that, out of the box. Because to me, something like Pinterest is something you want, like, has a lot of like discoverability, meaning like, say someone makes like a post on Pinterest, they want to like share it to their, Facebook feed, and you want, Facebook people to come and click on it and see it, and then maybe come and make an account because they're like, this is cool. Um, because of like the social and that sort of like spread, Flutter Web has some downsides about, server-side rendering and stuff like that. It has an initial load time, and you really have to like, yeah, build it properly so that when you share a link, it actually like deep links to the right place. Um, to me, Pinterest is less of a web app, more of a website, and Flutter is meant for, web apps. Now, that being said, I don't want to like deter you. You could totally, do it. Like for instance, like I'll just show you like one example of a site that I wouldn't build. I wouldn't have built this in Flutter, except that we made the iOS and Android apps in Flutter, and that's a great place to do it. But the web version, although it's good and it works, this is like a web version of a Flutter app. Um, if I was only doing a web version, basically, I'd probably build this in SvelteKit or something. Just because although we have like permalinks and stuff, it's like if someone shares this link, it's a little bit more, difficult, although I've built the stuff to make it work, to, get the nice previews on social media when it's printed, because, Flutter Web is a SPA, no server-side rendering. You're also, when a new person comes who's never, downloaded this version of Flutter before, there's a little bit of an extra time for it to kind of get the runtime, versus like something like SvelteKit that doesn't ship a runtime and can server-side render, is better. So basically, I guess to answer your question succinctly, if you're trying to build this thing, um, because you want to have like you want to also have like iOS, Android app sort of thing, and web's just like another deployment, like sure, it kind of makes sense. If you're just like, hey, there's just one thing I want to do and I only care about web, which is a good place to care about because, asking people to download apps, honestly, in 2025 is a big ask. I would definitely say like something like SvelteKit, even, Next.js, or whatever is probably going to just, be better in the long run. And that's just a brutal, honest response, but don't let it deter you. Um, all right. Cool, cool. Hopefully that helps with you with your your path. Yeah, don't let it deter you. Like you could totally build it, especially if it's also just like you're doing it for fun, like totally do it. If you're trying to build it to be something that's like a big successful thing used by a lot of people, it's probably not the best tool for that, if I'm understanding what the idea is correctly. Okay, necessary to create data sources all the time. Um, so no, it's not, I mean, frankly, clean architecture is overkill. I will be honest and say that right now. Like if I was building an app that I wasn't working on a big team, a lot of the things I've built aren't full clean architecture. I mean, I usually use feature-based architecture. So with this, but basically then it would go right into after like booking, it would go into like screens and UI and whatever. You wouldn't have all this extra layer. Um, so I I'm trying to, like, I want to make it clear. I don't think clean architecture is um, the best thing to use in most cases. Where it shines is, yeah, like working on an enterprise thing with a big team, a lot of different people, so that like you can kind of keep like people who are good at these kind of jobs can just touch the data source layer. People who are good at the UI can just touch there, and no one like is conflicting, and you don't have like merge conflicts and stuff. Um, and then the other place it shines is, yeah, if you're building something where you're like, I want to launch this on, Firebase or server or, Supabase or something like that, as like a MVP. But I do plan on using like a proper, building a proper, custom, backend in Django or Nuxt or whatever the hell you want to build it in. The advantage of clean architecture there is, you can keep all your work and just, work in basically the data layer to make your changes. Nothing about your UI will need to change, because of the way that you've like designed it. The reason I'm using clean architecture on this app is because I when I did my latest version of Houston, uses clean architecture purely because I want to be able to make it easy for people to be flexible and decide what backend they want to use and not have it locked in. Like previous version of Houston was a hard sell, I think, because it was like this works. It's basically like Flutter and Django, right? And it's I feel like it's hard to convince a Flutter developer who probably like not everyone, but a lot of them, I'd say a huge percent only know Dart, right? So giving them the option to be like to use a BaaS of like backend as a service, like Supabase, or using something like ServerPod, which is written in Dart, a little more familiar, or being able to use any like REST API, is just a nice option to have. So that's why it's done like that. And it does feel good. I kind of like it, but I have mixed feelings. So I guess to answer your question, I probably wouldn't build this with clean architecture if I didn't already have a really good framework in place that uses it. Oh, eventually we might write some more code. We might not. One sec. Okay, so I'm just reading. And then yeah, just to finish up answering that part of the question, like you can kind of do whatever you want. You can have a clean architecture app, but then have some things that don't do it. And I'm guilty of that too. Like I have some things in here, like um, let's see, style guide, for instance. There's no like the style guide feature doesn't have that stuff. It's just a basic screen or whatever. No, that's just kind of like a dumb example. But I think I have something else too in here that's not following that. You could definitely do that. And stuff in my core isn't necessarily and is not really like clean architecture because it's kind of like core stuff that just gets used as it is. Um, but yeah, ultimately, like, yeah, you can kind of do what you want, but there is value in like following a pattern, right? Like if you establish your app is going to go like this, like something that annoys me on a project that, projects that I made, is like maybe I, have started coding something some way and then I get lazy and then I come back to the project, like a year later to make a modification on it, and it's like confusing, right? Because it's like, okay, how do I do this? Oh, in the user model, I'm doing things like this way, but in this one, I'm doing it. So like consistency is nice. Okay, I agree with you, sir, because I'm learning and I read different things everywhere. I go all people saying the same thing differently. It makes me sad all the time. Yeah, don't let people get you down. Everyone has opinions. Ultimately, like your goal should be to ship things, even if the code sucks. Like there's tons. I don't think people are aware of how many like huge apps and stuff that are out there, apps, websites, whatever that, seem like good and professional, but under the hood they're pieces of shit. I've seen them. I've built some of them in the past, and it's but like it was shipped. It didn't just like stay on my computer. It's on the internet somewhere. So that should really be your goal. And you can listen to people's opinions and stuff, but don't just take them for you know don't assume that people know what they're talking about. A lot of it's just buzzwords. What are the missing pieces of serverpod that makes you prefer working with Django? Um, yeah, serverpod is really young. I love serverpod. Like I am using on a couple things. But it's very young right now. There's clanky stuff with, some stuff about like, and some of the stuff has been fixed since and whatever, but I know, there's some clanky stuff with the way migrations and stuff have worked for me. Right now, the way to host a serverpod project is kind of shitty. That's changing. Serverpod Cloud's coming out soon. Um, it's not the actual like models themselves, ultimately aren't like you can't, make your own custom user model, although I've heard something like that is changing too. There's a lot of like opinionatedness, which opinionated opinions are good. But it's nice to have some flexibility. Like maybe you want to use like strings as IDs instead of ints, maybe. Uh, on top of that, it's like Dart itself as a web ecosystem isn't nearly as accomplished as Python for obvious reasons. Meaning like, if I want to have like import an SDK for some blockchain thing or something, like there's probably not going to be a Dart one. There's going to be a Python one though. So that's like an advantage. I'm also just super familiar with Django. I've been using Django for like 15 years, even though it probably doesn't seem like it when I make lots of mistakes. But I'm really familiar, like, and Django just has great ways of, working with things like Celery and Redis and stuff like that, to making, configuration. You can build a 12-factor app very well in Django. I think to build a 12-factor app in ServerPod requires probably some customization, especially the way you do like environment variables, because environment variables shouldn't be stored in a YAML file. Um, all right. Where are we? Cool. So but like, I'm not talking anything bad about ServerPod. I love the project, love the team. I even have I made a pull request last week for ServerPod. So, I even put up a video about that if you want to check it out. And they're busy. It's Scandinavian summer just ended, and they're working on ServerPod 3, I think is dropping, or at least being announced officially next Wednesday at 11 a.m. ET. See, I know a lot about ServerPod. Obviously, I love ServerPod. And Houston uses ServerPod. I just have it stripped out from this project because it gets something I added to Houston is actually like a one-click thing to remove the ones you don't care about, which is kind of a fun thing. Um, Thank you, sir. That's what I'm doing every day, recording some video about Flutter and learning at the same time. Hey, I feel like I might. How do how do I go to see your channel activity? No, I feel like I've subscribed to you, Flutter Guides. You look familiar to me. Oh shit. I think I broke my chat. I think I broke the chat. Oh no. Okay, chat's back. Um, sir, have a good time coding. Thanks a lot for your advice. Take care. Thank you. You take care too. So I guess we can get back to coding now. Where were we? Oh yes, we are going to have a pinned announcement. Okay, so let's see if this worked. Because in theory, I should only get back one thing now. Yes, look, see, I only have the one that's unpinned. So what we need to do now is in our announcement, let's start with the domain to our data sources. So we're gonna have list, and we're gonna say list. We're gonna make one called list pinned, um, which yeah can still work with pagination, even though like it's not gonna be necessary for our use case. So we'll have that there, and then same with the announcement repository. We basically want to have list pinned. And all I should have to change now is in my data source. We're just gonna copy the list one. This is too much code to copy, right? We can make this. Now, I'm just copying it. I did have an idea. Maybe I'll refactor it after I get it working, but let's have list pinned. So the difference here is pinned. It goes like this. Yeah, we might refactor this to make it nicer. But let's just get through and get our refactor done first. So we also need to add basically this thing, and we just do and change this to list pinned. And wait, data source dot list. When we just make this say list pinned. You know what? I think I am going to actually do something here. List pinned. I'm not even going to have any parameters because like there shouldn't be more than 10. Like there's not gonna be a second page of pinned announcements. Like there should only ever be one. And I might even make that in the server, like logic in the server, so the admin can't make more than one pin. Because if you have too many, it's just gonna like take up your whole screen. So basically, I have to now get rid of this stuff, and then also get rid of this here. We need to make sure that we don't call this anymore. Oops, it's pinned. And then what does this inherit again? This list pin shouldn't have any of these either. So keep this really basic. Okay. And actually, let's make list pinned just return a list of announcements. Okay. So this would return a list of announcement. And then we also have to say, hey, this is going to return a list. Because I don't care about, knowing about pages. It's just like, just going to be the data itself that comes back. And now we just have to change this too. And so basically here, what we actually are going to return is results. Results. Instead of this wrapper that tells you like what page you're on and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Now we have to actually make the UI for this. So let's go to our home screen. And yeah, here's all of our cool things. So we're going to make a new widget. Do I have a home? Yeah, I do. So let's have something called, or this actually fits still within announcements, of course. Presentation, widgets. So let's just have a pinned announcement widget. I'm going to make it plural. Okay, so we're just going to have like a stateless widget here. Stateless pinned announcements widget. That's something I've noticed new, fairly maybe in the last few months. You'll actually get autocomplete in VS Code based on your file name for a class. So that was kind of nice. It just like knew what I was trying to call it and just did it. I love it. Okay, so we have our pinned announcement widget. We also need a provider. Let's have, I guess this should be, yeah, let's just call it like pinned announcements. Pinned announcements provide list provider dart. Okay, so I remember a few things on how I'm doing this stuff. It's been a bit. Like I want to kind of keep this simple. Now in this case, I don't want to call it provider. How do I do this again? So we're going to be using a river pod generator for this. Let me just look at any of my things. So yeah, underscore da da da. Then we're going to have our part of basically this file. Nope. Oh gosh. I'm trying to just copy this. But we need to put .g.dart. We also want to make sure we have riverpod annotation put, and we do at riverpod keep alive true. Okay, so in our build, and this is going to return just a list of announcements, right? And in this case, we're returning nothing when it like initially builds. But we'll have a load function, which it's going to kind of be something like this. In this case, we just want to load all of them. We're going to have errors here. This will be list pinned when we get it, no parameters, and we will get to this after. Let's just do this. So to get ref, we just need to actually like generate this stuff. So I'm actually gonna, just in case this causes some weird error. Is this just my error here? Yeah. Okay, so we'll run our make gen again. This will run our build runner, which will, find this annotation and build all of our, river potty stuff over here. This is riverpod 2. I'm not planning on upgrading this project to 3, but I will be using 3 on other stuff. So now we should have access to ref. And we do have to import this. So we're going to use that, our announcement repository provider .list pinned, right? We just made that. And we still want to fold on this because we could have a failure. And if so, let's just print the failure. We don't have to tell the users like, hey, we couldn't get any pinned announcements. Like if it didn't work, that's too bad. This should be a list of announcements though. So then we can just go state equals announcements. Now we need to make sure that this actually loads. So we can call the load function here, but we don't want to like await it because we can't actually await it. This is not asynchronous, but basically it will kind of start like this. This load will go and it will, update this thing here. We can even have keep alive false, and which is actually the default. So I could probably just get rid of that, but I'm going to keep that as false. And do I have to regenerate for that? I think so. Kartik, I'd love to answer your questions, and I will. I will take a pause from my work at a good moment when I'm done my train of thought. So feel free to smash it in. Okay, so we would have that. Then in our announcement widget, we can just say like pinned announcements. We can just call it announcements in this case. Ref dot. This needs to be. So I'm gonna use a base component here. This is my own special component, which I use everywhere or almost everywhere, which gives us access to ref, but does a lot of other cool things that we're not going to make use of right now. So we want to use the pinned announcement list provider, which this is the thing we just made, right? But this is the generated code. This is the code that we actually just wrote. So you'll see this is going to be a list of announcements, right? And in here, we're going to return a list view .builder. However, I want to make sure shrink wrap is on because this is going to be something that shows up. Shrink wrap true. And I also don't want it to be scrollable. Really, I'm just using a list view builder as opposed to like, I could do this as like a column, but list views are more performant. So what's the other one? Physics. Never scrollable physics. This makes it so it doesn't like allow it to scroll within itself. Then we have our context and our index. And basically here we're going to return, and I'm just going to do something kind of fun. Let's have a container, child text. We're going to use the announcement dot something, but of course we need to actually get access to the announcement, and that will just be like this. Final announcement equals announcements at that index. And in this case, I'm going to just call this A because I hate typing the word announcement. I will never make an app with the word announcement. I will call it something else. It's so hard. So we could just do something like that. Let's just see, and let's like just do as in decoration, color, box decoration, colors dot red, just to like see it, make sure it shows up. Back to our home screen, we are going to now add a pinned announcements widget. It's cool because these are all consts. The list view, does list view have spacing? No, it doesn't. That's why I have size boxes here. Oh. And look what I forgot to do. Item count. We have to use announcements.length. Otherwise, it just loops forever and it won't find anything. We'll just do a green arrow. And we should, in theory, see something ugly right at the top of our screen if all goes well. Although our restart is not happening. What the heck's going on? No, I'm gonna have to rebuild. So this might be a good time to answer your question, but I do want to see this through. Pause. Play. Wait, I don't know what's going on here. All right, that's fine. Stop. Stop running. Okay, let's answer a question. Well, that is running. One sec. I'm gonna read. Okay, I have read your question. Before I answer it, oh, where did my face go? If I click this. Um, so here, look, we have our big announcement. That's awesome. We'll make that prettier after this, but that's the pinned one and that's the unpinned one. And I think it'll go away if I leave this screen. I forget. Whatever. Okay, to answer your question. So yes, to paraphrase, you were in school, you're learning computer science, and you want to know, what tech to learn. I assume to get a job. There's different reasons to learn tech, right? Which I think is an important context you have. Like you might be learning it because you want to start your own business and make an app or something like that. And if that is in fact the answer, know that it is a challenging road ahead of you, but it is worth every all the stuff that goes wrong. Um, and super fun, but it's super hard. But I imagine working at trying to get a job working for a startup that already exists or an agency. Um, and those are two very different things, right? Like a startup that exists, they're going to have one tech stack that app, let's say it's an app or web app or whoever uses, and you'll be working on one thing for however long you're there, and that's super awesome because you can be like passionate about this thing and really bring stuff to it. Versus an agency, which is equally awesome in different ways. There might be different tech stacks. There's gonna be different projects all the time, and you're doing stuff. There's one extra layer of separation because you're kind of like instead of like working for the startup and seeing it reaping the rewards, not necessarily financially, unless you have like shares in it, but just it feels like more your thing. And as it succeeds, you feel good. Usually if you're working for like an agency, you're doing it for now another degree of separation for another client that maybe is a startup. And when they, succeed, maybe, that's still like good, but it doesn't feel like you're like on that team, you're just like, we're a code monkey for it or whatever. Also like agency work can, depending on the company, can be more boring too. So let's answer both of those. If you're like, hey, I want to work, my dream is to work for like a startup, right? Um, that's where I think, yeah, so like probably something like Flutter is definitely a good, a good potential start. Um, Flutter is definitely being used more in like the startup world than probably the agency and enterprise world, just because it's a little more modern and new and all that kind of stuff. And these big companies don't want to like jump ship on their stuff. Um, however, I think agency, which is probably a bigger C too. So I think agencies are like, okay, like, they're hired by clients to do not necessarily like, sometimes it's apps and stuff. But a lot of the time it's like more like websites and it's more like maintenance-y stuff and it's like, campaigns and building like HTML emails and like I go on all day with all the kind of stuff I have to do for people. Um, um, I think it's probably, more, if you're looking for like what's an easy or place to get my foot in the door, probably going, getting a job in an agency is probably going to, depending on your market, probably going to be easier than getting it at a startup. A lot of startups might not even have funding, right? And unless you want to work for free for equity, that's going to be a problem. So let's just let's carve this out as I am trying to get a job. So my like full recommendation would be, okay, like I think for a first job, like going the agency route as, basically a junior dev, is a reasonable way to go. And for that, if you want to have um, more chances of a bigger pool of places that can hire you for your skills. Definitely web development. And likely I'm talking probably like React, not React Native, but just like regular old React. Probably, being familiar with Next.js as an example. I just know it's a very common thing being used by big companies and small companies too. But like you want to learn, you want to make yourself, versatile too. So understanding that, maybe also understanding like playing around with things like SvelteKit, which to me is like way better than React, but it's not necessarily used as much in that world because it's again a little more new and a little more modern and a lot more better. But understand like seeing the difference between the two, will help you, be better. Um, maybe learning some backend stuff too. I would say, Python's probably the way to go. Or like PHP and Laravel, like it's being used, still a lot these days and is pretty straightforward. It's actually a good framework. I wish I still use I mean, I wish when I use PHP, Laravel was as good as it is now. But I don't touch that stuff anymore. Even like, I mean, these are like old things, but even like learning like WordPress, honestly, there's a ton of work in WordPress still. It's like, it sucks and I hate every moment of it. I basically say no to WordPress jobs if I can afford it, but there's always work in that because people still use it. Um, so yeah, that's kind of like my answer. And feel free to find me and on my website and stuff too, if you want to like ask a little bit more. I see that maybe you said something else. I also have a really good video that might be worth watching. It's called like How to Make Money as a Flutter Dev, and that's kind of like a clickbaity title because really it's about, hey, don't like, don't just call yourself a Flutter Dev, call yourself a software developer because I think like versatility and like understanding the big picture and being able to ship is like one of the best skills you can have. But check out that video. I'm not going to link it because you can find it easily enough. Um, I love the fact that you are considering learning for a startup or business, but many people do not consider it. All studies are done for job purpose, and everyone is busy doing the copy stuff. Yeah, I mean, I don't even think that's necessarily specific to India. Like, um, I think a lot of people, whether it's software development or going into engineering or accounting or whatever, you're trained in school, you're trained from your parents to be like, you're gonna go get a job, right? You're gonna get in at a company and you're gonna work there for your whole life. That's kind of like the mindset that we're trained into because that's how the world used to work. Like not even that long ago, right? Like I'd say just over like 20 years ago and before, that's how 99% of the time it was. You got a job at one place and you just moved up there if you were lucky. But we're in a new world where people, they don't they don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Like you start your own things or you go work and you bounce around and you're not just trying to get a raise at your company and impress your boss. You're trying to like leave that company and go somewhere else. And yeah, things like freelancing and startups and business owning is unless you're doing like an MBA or something, which even if you're doing an MBA, it's like a lot of the time you're still learning how to like get a executive job at a company. You're not being taught how to do a startup. It's very yeah, it's missing a lot. And I have some good content on that too. Good advice in there that I could probably do better. That would be better for you to watch than me to try and regurgitate it now. I hope that helps. But good luck. Um, I envy you. I remember when I was in second year. In fact, when I was in second year college is when I started my first business while still going to school. So those were good times. I had the whole world ahead of me, and now I'm a bit 20 years older. I still have the whole world ahead of me. Don't worry. What up, Tyler? How are you connecting to Django in this project? It's a disclaimer. I'm not a developer. Okay, so um, I'll try and explain this to someone who's not a developer and anyone else who's interested in watching. So you have the Flutter app, which is an app that runs on your phone. All the code for it is just on your phone that deals with all of its logic and how to display the pixels and what to do in what cases, right? And then secondly, you have a server, which is more like your centralized system, and that's the thing that understands your whole applications ecosystem, meaning like the different users, the different content that your database has, all that kind of stuff. The way these things to talk to each other which is different than the way we used to make websites back in the day, is they're connected through what's called an API, an application programming interface, which is just a fancy way of essentially creating like a language that, can be understood in a two-way direction. So as on the Flutter side, on the phone side, it's like I want to log in as an example. So the server's been built out a way to create what's called an API endpoint that is expecting you to send up, to this particular URL, a username and a password, and then the server itself will, take that data, do something to it, basically authenticate you, check if it's the correct password as an example, and then send a response back to the client, back to the Flutter app to say, yeah, like, yes, you're good, or no, you're bad, as like probably the most basic example. Um, and so this is very much like making a request to a website, right? Like I go to www.google.com and type in something. I'm basically like not necessarily communicating through an API in that way. It's probably just like a form, but I'm essentially telling the server, hey, I want this, search my thing. And it takes a second. That's the server processing, and then it's giving me a response, and that's like the new page. But generally with an API, or pretty much exclusively with an API, you're not getting a web page back. You're getting back data. You're getting back essentially something like JSON usually that is just a way to represent the data without, the UI itself, not like the things that mark up what the page should look like, because the app itself is going to take that data and then, use it the way it thinks it should. So that's how they communicate. It's called a RESTful API. Okay, you are a Django developer. Okay, then, then maybe maybe I made that a little too for noobs. But basically, then if we're talking about if you're not familiar with the Flutter side, we're using something called Dio, and Dio is just an HTTP package. It's basically just a way I can call things. So I, for instance, have a REST client. Let's just look at the REST client. So um, as an example, the REST client has a few things I can do. I can do a GET request, a POST request, a PATCH request, and a DELETE request. Those are the different things. There's also patch, put. Put would be another one, but I don't really ever use put. I pretty much just use patch, so I don't have it in here. So I would call this from my Flutter code in through a few different layers. And what this actually does is I'm passing through to this handle function that I have where it's like, okay, the method is going to be post. Um, this is the path I want to hit, basically like the URL of the API. What data potentially is coming up, which might just be nothing, but like an empty thing, but I can override that and we can ignore those. Handle itself is taking those parameters and it's creating a new client of Dio. So Dio is just like a something like, I don't know if you know JavaScript, like it's like Axios, or I guess, okay, the best thing if you know Python, I think you said, requests. This is like the version of Django or of Python requests, right? It's a way to basically say, hey, I want to do do.get. So with Python, it would be, request.get or request.post. So it's a way just to call something. So I'm passing that stuff through, I get some response back, and I basically have some like, checks and stuff for different exceptions. But ultimately, I just return the response.data and then things, work. So that's basically it. Great explanation. Thank you. Um, where were we? Oh yes, our announcement widget. Okay. Yay. So for this, I'm gonna do an experiment real quick. I want to just use my widget, announcement uh, list tile widget, I think. Let me just see because this is what I'm using here. Um, yeah, I think we can just use this, and we pass in um, announcement. We just pass in A here. Let's just see if this shows up. So I do see it here. However, I want to like highlight this a little bit more. We're gonna wrap with a container and decoration, box decoration, color, colors dot. Wait, we should have some theme colors. How do I do my? Is it app theme dot? No, I did not need to import that. How do I do? Sorry, it's been a bit. How do I do my colors? It's probably my theme. Theme dot of context dot color scheme dot maybe success. Do I have a success? Success button BG. Yeah, cool. That kind of works. Let's also give this a border radius. like 6. Let's put padding on this of just like maybe 4. And obviously that green is not, looking great for us. We need something that's going to be dark. Let's just see what secondary button. Something like that might work. I also want to make sure that these yeah, we probably want some padding around this stuff. And we just want to use padding of vertical like 4, because then we'll get that little bit of stuff there. Or maybe we do top of 8. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. As for our padding in here, let's use symmetric as well, or symmetric here, horizontal of like 12 and vertical of 4, something like that. Yeah. And we can have our width dismiss true. So we have this cool dismiss button here. Man, I do kind of want to use that success though. I think that looked nicer, although obviously the text has to change. So what we can also have is a final bool FG invert color or something like that. So we'll do this dot invert color equals false, but in this case, invert color is gonna be true because we want to basically have black text essentially. So where do we this? And title style. Oops. Text style color. So I can go invert color. I can do colors dot white. If not, I think I can just do null in this case and it'll still work. Oh, this should have been black. That was the whole point of this. And we basically would want to do the same kind of thing here. And this should maybe be black, like 87 or something, so it's still not quite as bright. Big announcement, boom. And then our dismiss button also needs to have a color of, we can use the inverted. Oh, what is, oh, because it's a const. As soon as you have that, you get colors dot black, else null, which will just fall back to what our theme is. Cool, so now we have this nice thing. Now this, I don't think is gonna work. And it's because our list itself needs to account for that. So we did that in the home announcement list widget. Dismissed UIDs. So what I'm going to do is also get access to this. This is just do anything that are dismissed. And our announcements actually should filter from that. Ooh. So what I would do is this. What is the best way to do this? So this would be a, and then we can do dismissed UIDs dot contain a dot ID. Let's fall back to 0 as the ID. What? Oh, wait. Oh, these are UIDs. That's why. But I want to negate this. I only want the ones that haven't been dismissed. Oh, oh, 1 sec. I gotta pause for a second. BRB. All right, word is in. I actually have to go pick up my son from daycare. Um, he's a little bit grumpy right now. So I will just fix this one little issue here. And well, I might be on later today, continuing where we are and chatting about stuff. So yeah, you see it went away now. And in theory, I should be able to restore and get it back. Yes. Cool. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for hanging out. Bye.